Hi there, this is the cage I got out of the engine. I've drilled the rivets out already so that I can get inside. What I mean by the cage, there we are, that's where the clutch plates themselves go, and the hub of the clutch, the engine crankshaft drives the larger of the gears around the outside here. The smaller one is a scissor gear to eliminate backlash. So the idea is that the springs convey the load from this gear to the clutch basket below, and I'll show you what's happening inside. So we have the cover plate held on by the three rivets drilled out and punched out. This is just a cover plate to hold these springs in position. Now these four main springs here are the driving springs that convey the load from this gear down into the aluminium casting below. The immediate thing about this basket is that the springs are all shorter than they should be. You'll see over there in the background is four springs of the correct length with a ruler laid across the top of them. If I take any one of these springs, you'll see that it's shorter by some margin, probably 1/8 shorter than they really should be. So this basket has only done 15,000 miles or less for certain. Take the Belleville washer out that keeps the whole unit held tightly together. The rivets weren't loose at all in this basket. The cover plate was correctly held in place, there wasn't a problem there. That only happens if the springs for some reason have eaten into the aluminium of the basket below and started driving on the cover plate here on these steps, rather than driving on the lugs in the basket, which I'll show you in a bit. So that's the washer, Belleville washer, that keeps everything pressed tight together. And I'll lift this off, and first of all we'll just see that there is one spring here, and that is the spring that provides the scissor action, the loading for the scissor gear, the small gear on the outside. I can't move that by hand, but normally the teeth would be in line and the spring holding them tight so that there's no backlash when this tries to rock backwards and forwards against the crankshaft, as the crankshaft accelerates and decelerates at idle. So if you've got noise at idle, the fact that that spring's gone weak or broken could be part of the problem. It's fine in this case. This is a second spring. It is a driving spring, but it's a very weak spring. It barely has anything to do. I can squash that with my fingers, and there's nothing wrong with that spring at all. It's in good condition. It's a bit worn through there on the wire, so perhaps it's not so good as it should be. So that's the scissor gear. I'll try and separate this so that that's it. You can see that they are two separate gears. The main gear, the main driving gear, and the scissor gear just sprung against it. So now to the main driving gear. That all looks in good condition. This row of 6 holes, ring of 6 holes, is a set of dogs which drives the oil pump. The oil pump drive gear is on there as well, with its little drive chain down to the oil pump in the sump. So when we turn the basket over, that's how it came off. First of all, we notice there's a thrust washer. This stops the steel of the basket eating down into the face of the aluminium. So the steel of the gear eating down into the face of the aluminium basket. There's the thrust washer in place with this pressed against it. And there's immediately a sign of lack of lubrication. This here is all picked up with nasty marks. Similarly, the face it bears against on the gear as well. And then the important part of these dampers is the bearing there in the aluminium casting. It's a nice wide bearing in this one, and you can see the bearing face here. Now again, it's obvious that this is short of lubrication. I don't know if you can see this on the picture, but this is all picked up and scored and overheated, where it's not necessarily a good fit in there, but the lubrication is broken down, or there hasn't been any lubrication. It only shuffles like this backwards and forwards as the springs expand and contract under load, but nevertheless it doesn't look good. So that's part of what will need rectifying as well. these are the 4 springs. All of them are too short. I'll show you. Pass that one through there. Not quite as bad as the first one I put in. That one's under length again. Again under length. And again under length. So it's a trip to the spring works to get some new springs to start with. This plate here is clever in that it works to stop the springs actually eating into the aluminium casting. So it's good. A lot of manufacturers just let the spring run in the aluminium pocket there, and you take them in bits and the spring's eating into the aluminium and not doing its job at all as well. So this is much better quality in terms of that. So here we come finally to the actual casting itself. A nice well built unit. There's a peculiarity in that these splines are different widths apart in some cases, so that you have to use the manufacturer's own clutch plates, which is a bit naughty. You can't just go and get clutch plates off the shelf like you can for many of the Japanese manufactured clutches. This is a European built clutch. So the modification is going to take the form of new springs, cleaning up all the bearing surfaces, renewing this bearing in the middle, and I'll show you why it's particularly important that that bearing in the middle there is renewed. The gear sits together like that, and usually you can feel it straight away. There will be some play between the, as I press side to side, the gear moves in the bearing, and that will have made an awful vibration as the bike was running. There we go, that would have been vibrating all the way through the machine all the time. Probably only small, and you wouldn't know it was there without riding a bike that didn't have it, but that's pretty awful. So that, coupled with the fact that the springs are too short, so that the springs aren't doing their proper damping, and the actual weight of the clutch, the weight of this gear and the weight of the clutch with all the clutch plates and the hubbing is significant. It's a good few kilograms. To have that lot not really under control and flapping about on the shaft and vibrating and doing what it wants at certain engine RPM, and particularly just as you take off from rest, is not good. The behaviour of these springs in these slots is particularly important as you set off from rest, because it is what damps any irregularities in the engine firing and you letting go of the clutch lever to set off. As I say, this basket has done 15,000 miles or less, and it's in a pretty sorry state.